After 3 cold and rainy days, I arrived to the last day of my backpacking trip. The mountain kept pleasant, but also set surprises for today as well. Good morning. This night it wasn't that cold. It warmed up to maybe even 7 degrees, but the wind was colder and blew the wall of the tent on my face several times. Because of this, I was colder than last night. So at some point I had to put my rain jacket over the parts of my sleeping bag where I felt the wind is coming through. It also came to my mind that I could put the Z-seat inside the sleeping bag to block the wind, but in the end it didn't come to that. Today is the last day. I will descend to Bărcaciuhat, then to Poiana Neamțului, where we'll meet with Fuzzy. So that's all I would have needed, half an hour of sunshine to dry my things. But there was none in the past 3 days, so I had to handle it without that. And there's Peak Chortia, which I've climbed yesterday. If I'm not mistaken, that small bump in the middle. There was my tent, and these are the remains of the new shelter. Those big metallic parts were moving in the strong wind, so I was thinking to myself that hopefully they won't hit me on the head. And that one is the old shelter, which for a long time was used to store garbage while the new one was still functional, but now people had to move back there. The weather is much better than yesterday. Down there we can see Negojuhat, then the rest of the ridge. I just met a guy from Prague who was hiking in sandals without socks. I told him that last year we visited Prague on our way to Norway, and he told me that he lived in Norway last year. Because there's a spring on the map, I asked him if he has seen any water, and he very kindly offered me his water if I'm thirsty. So I met another cool person. After yesterday, the guy from the couple from Vlcea announced me that he goes to the spring and asked me if I need water. I was sitting in my tent, and in the end he brought me more water than he did to themselves. So it's really cool to meet such kind people. Salut! Well, because this valley looks like it's suitable for grazing, I decided to filter the water, even if it probably would have been okay without that, but I'm also kind of sensible from this point of view. The weather is obviously good now, so it's time for the sunscreen. Even if it's not that warm and it's somewhat windy, at this altitude it's important to protect ourselves from the sun. Otherwise, we'll get pretty nasty sunburns. Not sure if you can see it, someone is flying over there. From here, there's a nice view over our route: Suru, Budislavu, Chortia, Skara, and there's Peak Negoju. You can see nicely the surroundings of Peak Negoju. That big pyramid in the center is Negoju. To the left, the Strunga Ciobanului trail. To the right, Vârful dintre Strungi, Șerbota, Mâzgavu, and in the distance, Peak Lăițel and Laita would follow, but they are probably not visible because they are behind that edge. And that dark green edge is the Șerbota edge, on which you can descend to Negojuhat. This glade is the meeting point of the yellow cross and the red cross marking, on which we descended 2 years ago, at least partially, because first we climbed Peak Skara, then descended on that rocky ridge, and the trail avoids the peak. From here it's quite imposing, where we climbed up to Lake Avrig 2 years ago. You can see the trail a little bit. By the way, that valley is also very beautiful. That's the trail that leads to Avrig Lake. I will surely return. Let's recap. Skara, Csortya, that's Avrig Lake, Portica Avrigului, Budislavu, Suru. Getting back to civilization. And from here we can already see Bărcaciu hut, so I stopped to dry my socks and boots a little. And to eat something, my last food, because I lost the dry bag with the chocolate bars. So this also turned out as a spontaneous weightless plan. I finally got some signal, so I went online, and several people messaged me that alpinist Török Zsolt has died. More precisely, here in Făgăraș mountains near Peak Negoiu, or on the way to Peak Negoiu. So that's why I heard the helicopter yesterday. No. I'm at the crossroads between the Red Cross and the Yellow Cross. As far as I remember, 2 years ago we went to the right, because we had enough time. Yes, here we can see the markings. And now I descend to the left. Lots of tasty blueberries. And here comes some crawling under the fallen trees. I arrive soon to the hut. It took me 2.5 hours with some rest time as well. I won't stay long, I just get some water and continue my way down. The same improvised markings as 2 years ago. I guess the storm took down these trees. It says 15 minutes to Poiana Neamțului, but I remember it being longer. I was just thinking that those 15 minutes seem suspicious, because Bărcaciu is at 1,550 meters and Poiana Neamțului at around 700-800. So descending 800 meters in 15 minutes, I wanted to say it's possible only rolling down the mountain, but it's not the right moment. This 4-day backpacking trip on the western ridge of Făgăraș mountains is getting close to its end. Unfortunately, the last day was a sad one, in spite of the beautiful weather. We lost Török Zsolt, an alpinist who climbed multiple peaks above 8,000 meters. And unfortunately, he's not the first one in recent years, if we think about Ulis Tek or Erős Zsolt. I cannot say anything else other than clichés, but I'm sure that he did what he loved. For yesterday, my original plan was also to climb Negoiu where he lost his life, but because of the bad weather and other problems such as wet gear, in the end I went to climb Csortya. There was also some risk of getting lost because of the fog, but I don't think I was in great danger. I couldn't check the details yet, but from the messages I got, it seems like the rock he was holding to tore off. You cannot really plan for something like this. I will try to draw the conclusions of this trip, especially what concerns myself and can be useful for you as well. First of all, you should bring a waterproof phone like myself, or if it's not waterproof, put it in a very safe place where no moisture can get. For instance, a Ziploc bag or a dry bag. The pocket of the rain jacket, I think that's where Fuzzy put it, can be risky if it gets wet from the inside because of perspiration. So, it depends what kind of pocket it is, if its interior is just mesh or a material which lets vapors pass, or if it's also a waterproof material. The second conclusion is, especially if it's rain in the forecast, but actually always, because you never know if it's gonna rain or not, Pack your stuff inside dry bags, even if you have a rain cover. I had one too from the beginning. The most important is to have your sleeping bag and the change of clothes you sleep in packed inside dry bags, which I also did. But even gear from soft shell material, which dries quickly, and you would think that it's not a problem if it gets wet, I say it's better to be safe and put everything in dry bags, or at least some simple grocery bags. Regarding camping, I think that those wet and cold conditions are the most difficult, in which I've also been. If they are combined with strong wind too, well, it has some advantages and some disadvantages. If there's no wind, the risk of condensation is the greatest. So after we get out the tent, which of course was inside the dry bag, mine wasn't. And even if I put it deep inside the backpack, it was already wet when I got it out. Okay, during the day you have to open the backpack sometimes and some water gets inside then as well. Anyway, I recommend the tent, which goes up outside first or both layers at the same time. No way those cheap ones that go up inside first, because in a storm like the one we climbed in, by the time you put up the outside, it's game over. You have a swimming pool inside the tent. Mine goes up interior and exterior at the same time. So, if it was inside a dry bag, we now have raised a dry tent. On the other hand, if it's windy, it helps with the ventilation, so it reduces condensation, but then the other danger appears, that the exterior is being blown on the interior. Because of that, when the two layers touch, all the moisture ends up on you, because evidently most of it will be in the region of the head, because that's where you exhale the warm air. So, all I can recommend is to have a good tent. Okay, if you sleep near the huts or in safe places, then any tent from Decathlon will do. But if you go up on the ridge or to exposed spots, then it is worth it to invest into a good tent. This time I brought my small Vango, because I didn't want to carry the big X-bed, even if it would have been surely been more stable. Actually, that's why I bought it. I was looking for a tent that's stable in strong winds. The X-bed goes to sleep at 120 km per hour, which may seem extreme, but on the ridge of Făgăraș mountains, even in the summer, there can be wind over 100 km per hour. It's very unusual, of course, but it can happen. The same way as close to zero temperatures can happen, as I have felt on my own skin. That's why I have a 0 degree sleeping bag, which means comfort level at 0 degrees. I have to emphasize this. Not the extreme, not the lowest number, rather the comfort. I could sleep, it was alright, especially after the sun came up and it became warmer inside. But I woke up a few times during the night because the wind was caressing me inside the sleeping bag. That happened also because the tent is a 3-season one, also an important aspect, which means that the inner has mesh parts. On the other hand, our X-bed's whole inner can be closed with zippers. I used to have one more tent from Vango, which I've sold because at 2.9 kilograms I considered it too heavy to carry just for myself. When I'll buy a good solo tent, I will sell this one as well. Until the conditions aren't too extreme, this one does it too. I don't think the wind went above 40-50 kilometers per hour, so it blew the tent on my face a few times. No big deal. Other than that, it's a cool little tent, especially for the price. In any case, I can recommend the Vango brand. The other tent was of course much more stable. It had 3 poles, which is one of the most stable types. Maybe I'll do a separate video about this. And this one has 2 poles and it's a tunnel design, so one of the most unstable types. On the first night at Skara, I put it where I could because all the proper spots were taken, and when I moved it, I had to find a balance between the direction the wind will hit it without myself rolling out of it. In the Skara saddle, the wind is basically blowing from every direction, so you cannot really make any assumptions, but most of the time it blew from the corner where I had my backpack inside the tent. Of course, we tried to ventilate the tent to minimize condensation, which in rainy weather is quite difficult, because if you open the outer part, the rain gets inside. For this problem, different tents have different solutions. This Vango has above the zipper some kind of gutter, where you can open it a little if there's no wind. If it's blowing, the rain will get inside there as well. So, we try to minimize condensation, but we won't get rid of it completely, that's for sure. For me, another conclusion is to bring some kind of rag which dries quickly and can absorb a lot of moisture. I had to use paper tissues to wipe the inside of the tent. Of course, a rag would have been better. Now the question is, how could I have dried it? Because even small things like socks or boxers, before the sun came out or before I put them inside the sleeping bag, they didn't dry. But you have to be careful with putting wet things inside the sleeping bag, especially when it's cold, because you're the one who will freeze and the sleeping bag will be wet as well. So only small things which are not dripping. That would be my recommendation. A mistake I made was to gather the whole tent together. Of course, I tried to fold it in such a way to keep the inner dry. Spoiler, I failed. What I could have done is that I could have disconnected the interior, which was relatively dry, and put it inside the backpack in a dry bag, and strap the exterior outside the backpack the way I did with the whole tent. Then, when I get to the camping spot, first I put up the outer, wipe the condensation from its inner part with the rag, then finally reconnect back the dry inner. Well, in those weather conditions and darkness and fog and exhaustion, this would have been kind of crappy. Excuse my French, but maybe that would have been the by-the-book solution. Another conclusion is that the mountain can catch you off guard anytime, so it shouldn't be underestimated. Even if you climbed 8,000-meter peaks, even if you camped in Norway and Iceland, you can have surprises even in Făgăraș or Tatra mountains. You have to be always careful. I hiked during the night too on this trip, on a trail which I knew well. I had proper gear. I consider that I took generous margin of error. I had additional gear in case things go south. I had plenty of energy reserves inside me, but even then, that small technical climb from Avrig Lake wasn't the most pleasant one. All because the rocks were wet. So, always assume that things can get worse. Be prepared physically, have sufficient gear, make sure you know where you are and where are you heading. Theoretically, I could have got lost on my way to Chortea, but I had a map, I had a smartphone with 2 different offline apps on it, and the terrain wasn't particularly difficult, so if anything happened, I could have just turned back the way I came and leave the peak for the next time. Oh yes, the most important advice. Don't lose the dry bag with the chocolate bars, because you'll be hungry. I'm fine for now, because I took extra food with me, and I didn't keep all of it in the same place. I only lost the bars. If you have my dry bag, send it back. Maybe the wind just blew it down from there, considering the intensity it had, or somebody just found it. Maybe the shepherds got there first thing in the morning. It happened. I have to order some dry bags anyway, based on the previous conclusions. Let me tell you something funny. On this trip, people believed twice that I was a bear. When I camped near Suruhat, some guys came out at one point during the night because they heard some noises, but it was just me, snoring. I found this out the next day at Skara from the guys who slept in the shelter. And the second time it was when the couple from Vlcea first saw me from the distance, and I was looking for something inside the backpack perhaps. But they only saw something or somebody on all fours, so they started to yell. I thought that they see a bear somewhere, but I said to myself that it's probably hidden in an angle I cannot see. Later they caught up because I climbed through and they cut it off, and then they told me that they thought that I'm the bear. So look at me. They thought twice that I'm a bear. So perhaps that's what I am. With all the talking, I got lost, so to say. More precisely, I deviated from the marked trail, but from what I can tell, this road goes to the same place. I wanted to tell you a little bit about risks, about taking risks. There is no life without risks. Even if you stay all day inside the house, you can sleep in the bathroom, you can hit your head, and you can die. Of course, we took a risk too by getting into the car and driving here. You are also taking a risk by going outside because a car can hit you even on the sidewalk. Everybody feels where's the limit, where you are losing control out of your hands. Sometimes the limit is not where we feel it. This sometimes depends on our actions, sometimes it doesn't. When something doesn't depend on us, there's not much we can do. We can only accept that it didn't depend on us. If somebody climbs on a route where before him hundreds or thousands of others have climbed and the rock breaks exactly in his hands, that's a huge misfortune. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he took unnecessary risks. If I try to ascend Chortea and I get lost, then yes, we can say that I took an unnecessary risk because I saw that it's foggy, but I still tried to climb it. We have to find a balance. Sometimes we can even lower the probability that a risk that doesn't depend on us appears. For instance, if we drive with a lower speed, then if a wild boar jumps in front of us, we have a better chance of avoiding it. We have to find a balance among these aspects, and I don't think that the solution is to stay at home. And I don't think that the solution is to always stay inside our comfort zones. Rather, try to slowly push the limits little by little, every time it's possible. The lightning can also hit us anytime, but on the ridge of Făgăraș mountains in a storm, with a bigger chance than in the city while walking. So I don't like to be on the ridge when it's lightning. No matter how much I try to be prepared for any bad situation, I don't like to tempt fate like this. The place where the lightning hits doesn't depend on me, for sure. I feel that the risk is too high. Everybody decides for themselves. I'm curious if I will be able to cross the river, if there's any bridge, or I have to go in the water to the waist. Yeah, that's where I came down. During the spring for sure it wouldn't have been very nice. And I have to figure out how I will cross there. I cross safely, there I can already see the marking, and a group of hikers is arriving right now. Here it says 2 hours, something like that is what I also had in my mind, so I guess the descent should have been 1 hour and 15 minutes. From here, 2 hours, 20 minutes. I almost got back to Poiana Neamțului. The dogs will bark at me soon. I will be about half an hour late compared to the time we agreed on, which can be considered quite punctual on the mountain.